Moving on to the conversations with local community arts members. And the first one actually is Anne Barkhouse, who is here with us this evening. So Anne Barkhouse was born in Vancouver, BC, but she has strong ties with both coasts, as her mother is from the Nimkish band of the Kwakiutl First Nation of Alert Bay in BC, and her father is of German and British descent from Nova Scotia. And as a result of personal and family experience with land and water stewardship, Barkhouse's work examines ecological concerns and intersections of culture through the use of animal imagery. Inspired by issues surrounding empire and survival, she creates installations that evoke considerations of the self as a response to history and the environment. She has an excellent reputation. She has shown her work across Canada and in New York. Her public art installations can be found in parks and university campuses across Ontario, and her work is in very many significant collections. And we're delighted that she has been able to join us here. And she is really just going to talk, I think she said, about her public art and against that, just that body of her work. So Marianne?
For tonight, I'm just going to limit myself to my public art work as opposed to my indoor work, which is different considerations with it. And I would also say, yes, I have, while I am living up in the Halliburton area, I bring to my artwork, I think, or try to bring to it some of the values from both sides of my family, from British Columbia, from Nova Scotia, and all of the people that live in between. I know Kwakiutl is quite a mouthful to say, and there's an even longer way of saying Kwakiutl, which is my mother's First Nation, which is Kwakwawiwa, which basically means the Kwakwala-speaking people. And a lot of people have not ever heard of Kwakiutl people until maybe about a month ago when Jody Wilson-Raybould became a household name. And just as an aside, that my uncle married her aunt years ago. They're now divorced, but so that it's like, oh, suddenly Kwakiutl are in the news. Anyway, when I was just going to go through a couple of the different public artworks that I've done around the province and one out in Alberta, just to highlight different ways of dealing with the municipality or the galleries that have commissioned these works. And some of the considerations. So if you take anything away from this night, from the artist perspective, I would hope that you would have come away with a better understanding of why it's really important to, as you're taking on these plans, to build in the art perspective as soon as you can, so that helps out. It just makes sense, as opposed to having an area planned and then bringing something in at the last moment. So this is a piece that I did with another artist, Michael Belmore, several years ago. It's called Esker, and it's right by the Otonabee River in Peterborough. And this was undertaken at a time when the city of Peterborough was revitalizing the whole riverfront. So it basically was like an industrial waste zone. And they put in a whole bunch of different features, not just artwork, but other fountains and things like that. So for this particular piece, which is quite substantial underneath, it's like an iceberg. So for this particular commission, if you look at that wall, the wall itself was influenced by the Irish settlers that came to the area. So just a quick word about when I do public artwork, I think it's, for myself, it's really important for it to relate to the local community, the history, and the communities that are there now, as well as the communities that have been in that area. So with this particular piece, the idea was that the river has been a pathway for the First Nations people that were in that area, and in fact First Nations as well as many other settlers and animals too. So it starts off as a pathway and goes up using the dry stone technique. With this particular piece, everything below grade was covered by the city of Peterborough, and the concern of the artist was just above grade. And I think in many instances that makes sense, because the city knows what's under there better than anyone else as they're developing it. So it just seems like a duplication of effort, I guess, in a way, if you make the artists go and have their own geotechnical engineers and things like that. It's just an economy of savings in not only money, but in time when you do things like that. So what is underneath this, this particular piece is like 2.5 truckloads of concrete. And it's just like an ice, but that's what was needed in order to keep that wall secure for years to come. And then at the very end, there's 2 bronze wolves. For me, when I'm inserting creatures into my installations, I think that it's really important to animate them as that there's a relationship between the creatures, or there's a relationship to the audience that comes to see them. And it's that gaze which is, I think, hopefully draws people into whatever the conversation is around the piece. So enough about the wolves. Here's some beaver. This piece was for the Robert McLaughlin Gallery, and I live in a wetland. Some would call it a swamp. So I see a lot of beavers right outside my back door. So I know that this time of year, they're waiting to come out from under the ice. But at least at my place, it's really great to see bare pavement here, or bare ground rather. So with this particular piece, it was a relatively easy to install. So something like this, as far as it didn't need the massive foundation that the other one did. And so that's granite and bronze. This is a piece that's at Carleton University in the quad, right in front of the library, as well as several other buildings there. With this piece again, that gaze was really important for me. Looking at, for me, locavore was about the archive and the information that is held within the land, within the natural systems. So there is an inversion in this particular piece between what you would normally think, the predator and the prey. The predator is calling the shots. It's actually some of the other smaller creatures and plants and animals within the ecosystems that are driving some of the cycles. Within the paved area, there are images sandblasted into it of plants that are significant to the hare as a food source. So I was trying to encapsulate a little snapshot into one cycle of the food chain, as it were, in this piece. And just going back to that piece briefly, for this, I was responsible again for everything above grade. And the university looked after the engineering and the costs of creating the foundation for this particular piece. Again, the universities or any of the buildings that you would have here, there's, as you know, there a lot of sensitivities around what is below the level of the ground. Mainly, it's a lot of pipes. Electrical and things like that. So it really is good to have those partnerships with the artists early on to give them time to develop that. So then everything hopefully goes seamlessly as time with installation. Of course, Quarry, this is a piece that's here. And this piece I was influenced again by the history of this area with the layers of history of the settlers that eventually came into this area, but also that the intersection between the man-made, the built environment, and the natural environment. So here you have a little, I took a fragment of the design of one of the parterres at Versailles, because why not? It's sort of, I just thought it's a pinnacle of sort of design. I revere André Lenôtre, this great landscape architect. But in one of the places where there should be a nice, neat, tidy little circular granite thing, I've inserted a natural esker boulder from this area. And likewise, the dogs that I chose for this piece, I was thinking of the idea of dogs as very much a man-made construct as far as how we make them big, little in between, furry and all that kind of thing. But yet, no matter what we make dogs look like, they respond the same way to a squirrel, no matter where you are. So to give you a little snapshot of, this is partly of my plea for why we need more time from start to finish for an artist. This is just for my process. It's not the same for other artists. I work with doing the sculpture myself, but I also work with a team of fabricators, whether I'm working in the different metals or the granites and so forth. So, for example, this is the borzoi as I was working on it in my studio back home. So this is done out of an oil clay. This then goes to the foundry, and the foundry then brutally cuts up my sculpture, casts it in different pieces, welds it back together, and then I get it back to do all the finishing details on it. That process alone can take 8 months to a year for the casting alone for that part, which is why if you put out a tender for an artist to do something and you give them 8 months to do it, it's like, well, I have to have the thing already done and at the foundry. But I love the process. So there are ways that you can speed it up sometimes, but foundries, all the good art foundries and all the good fabricators have a waiting list of people with their work. So that's the body of the borzoi. That's some of the pieces of the granite as it was being set up. So like a lot of things, a lot of preparation to make it look like magic, that it's all just sitting there nice and even. Took weeks of preparation for the guys to get that granite, which is all in different pieces, all perfectly level. I had a fantastic team from Richard Hawkins Construction that I worked with for this. Again, it's a huge foundation underneath there. It's all about mold making, so, and I had a wonderful crew to work with. That's before the granite pour. There it's coming, you know, just love, or the granite pour. Yes, that's what I do, I pour granite. I make molten rock, no, concrete. Our friend cement. So all of that to have a nice, you know, and once all the landscaping is done, then you don't see, you know, it's, hopefully it all looks seamless when you go to see it. And, you know, of course, and you never know how the public is going. Sometimes the public interacts beautifully, sometimes not so much as you know. This is a recent piece that I did for the city of Edmonton. It's called Rain. Again, for this piece, I worked in bronze and granite, and I was looking at the history of that particular location. So for some of the images, I sourced dinosaurs that had been found very close to that location. So in this case, it was Albertosaurus, which is like a small T-Rex, and of course a coyote, because I think things kind of starting, and coyotes are a whole topic on themselves. You may or may not want to hear about that. If you want me to talk your ear off at it later on, I'll tell you all about coyotes and the pluses, the minuses, the in-betweens, and what we can do to help cope with them. And then there was an Edmontosaurus, which was a Hadrosaurus, so one of the duck-billed dinosaurs. So again, looking at the different cycles of predators and prey who have moved through the area. Trilobite, which is a really tiny little creature. Of course, the hare, this time relaxing behind the coyote. There he is with his little saucy toes. And I included this different plants, but similar idea as far as plants, in this case, that were significant to the First Nations of the area, as well as some of the animals, but primarily the importance was with First Nations that had passed, because the city of Edmonton, that particular location, was an important crossroads between several different nations that would be meeting there over the years. Okay, to start from a little squiggly drawing that I might do as I'm developing that idea, up to the engineered drawings when I'm working with the fabricator. To, you know, when it's fabricated and on its way to being delivered to the site, to the massive, you know, the equipment. It's like, for doing public artwork for me, not that I've built a house, but I imagine that it's a lot like being a general contractor, that you have to have control of the design, all your subcontractors. Again, the good subcontractors, you have to book them way far in advance. So. And then, so this piece is at what used to be the Canadian Museum of Civilization, now the Canadian Museum of History. I worked with Leanne Martin as she was curator working at the museum at that time. She's now one of the recent Governor General Award winners from the Canada Council, which I was very pleased to see. She's an amazing lady. But just as far as the considerations of from when this was start to finish, I worked a lot with the staff at the museum and with their engineers and with their contacts, so that for this piece I was responsible mainly for the construction and delivery of the artwork, and they were responsible for the installation and the engineering, because again, they know their building, and The only thing I was worried is, will Douglas Cardinal like this piece? Douglas Cardinal is the architect. Thank God he loved it. He said, when he was at the opening, I was like, please, please. And he's a wonderful man, but he's also very opinionated, as you know, and I respect that opinion. But then he said, Marianne, this piece should have been here right at the beginning. I went, oh, thank goodness. But this piece is titled Namatsala. It's primarily copper and bronze. And it is based on a story that my grandfather told me. My grandfather was a fisherman out in British Columbia about a time that he helped a wolf get across a treacherous stretch of water. This would have been, I'm guessing, back in the 20s sometime. At the time he told me the story, I'm a little kid, I was like, okay, well that happens. And since then I've seen documentation of a lot of animals, not just wolves, but bears and deer and cougars that they're swimming between the mainland and the islands, and I guess they get tired and they will jump in boats if there's one around that they can jump into. So perhaps not as far-fetched as you might think. Anyway, the basis of, at the core of that story, I thought that that story for me was about compassion for other beings and latitude of thought and creative thinking. And I thought if there's ever a place for compassion and latitude of thought, it's right across from Parliament Hill. So that location was a gift to me. I think that's it. So that will be my plea for compassion and latitude of thought when it comes to hiring and working with your artists.
So our second speaker is Andrea Carson Barker, and she is an expert on contemporary art, architecture and design, a former art critic and founder of one of Canada's first cultural blogs, View on Canadian Art, from 2000 to 2015. Sorry, 2005 to 2015. She's now working on numerous ambitious initiatives to bring art to the city of Markham, where she manages her family's real estate investment company. She was co-founder and founding curator of the daily online art auction, artbombdaily.com, and host of the online web TV series Artland. So Andrea is a member of the City of Toronto Public Art Commission. She's a former board member of Mercer Union, Artist Run Centre, Art Scene, Business for the Arts, and the Toronto Design Offsite Festival. And she continues to write occasionally about art and design and promote arts and culture on Instagram and Twitter. So we look forward to hearing her ideas about public art in Markham.
So public art presents a great opportunity. Developing and implementing the public art plan is the beginning of a wonderful opportunity for the City of Markham to work with the process of public art, strong and forward-thinking public art, to highlight Markham as a noteworthy city, much the way that the Marilyn Monroe Towers did for the city of Mississauga. I think we have gone from a time when the cultural value of public art was much less clear to today when many businesses and government interests are not only seeing its value, but using public art to develop awareness around their brand. You don't have to look abroad to see great examples of this. The City of Vancouver has an excellent group of public artworks that reflect the city's identity. This piece is by Douglas Copeland. I believe it's called Digital Orca from 2009. It's made from powder-coated aluminum on a stainless steel base. And I believe it sits outside the Vancouver Convention Centre where Vancouver's many tourists can see it every day. My next slide is called Trans Am Totem by Marcus Bocott, and it was part of the Vancouver Biennale, and I believe it was installed in 2015. Located near False Creek, east of Vancouver's downtown area, the sculpture incorporates stacked cars on top of a base made from a tree trunk and is clearly visible from Vancouver's public transit, the SkyTrain. Art is a complex and layered language, and the right piece of public art can help define a community. Is it welcoming and accessible, cutting edge, traditional, engaged, or diverse? Many corporations, too, find that art can speak to the currency, curiosity, and confidence. To their currency, curiosity, and confidence. It can reveal an international point of view, willingness to experiment, and the ability to look beyond the obvious towards new directions. Chicago is one of the world's great cities for public art, and it has used public art to add vibrancy and dimension to its public space and complement its great and historic architecture for years. Cloud Gate, which I don't have a slide of, but I'm sure you're all familiar with it, it's that giant silvery bean in Millennium Park, is the holy grail of public artworks with a price tag to match. It was funded by private donors who understood and believed in the cultural importance and value of public art. One of my favorite pieces in Chicago is Flamingo by Alexander Calder. It weighs 50 tons, is composed of steel, and is vermilion in color, which was chosen specifically by the artist to offset the modernist architecture by Mies van der Rohe in the background. The scale, color, form, and material is all perfectly suited to enhance its environment. The latest piece that's being talked about, which I also don't have a slide of, but is Thomas Heatherwick's brand new vessel at New York's Hudson Yards, which is an enormous sequence of viewing platforms articulated into a kind of vase shape, which the artist does not define as art, interestingly. It's more of an inverted type of public space. This shows how important it is for cities to be open to the changing and flexible definitions of public art as well. As was mentioned by Helena, I think, the city of Markham sees itself in part as a capital for high tech. One nice thing about digital and high-tech public art is that it gives off light and often movement, and is therefore at its best more noticeable and engaging to the public. With that in mind, look at some of the digital and new media artwork right in Toronto that can speak to this idea. This piece is outside the Rogers Building on Bloor Street, and it's by the British artist Julian Opie. Titled People Walking 2006, it is a digital LED piece that is continually moving and very much in keeping with the work that Opie is known for around the world. I wish I had a video of it because it's a constant stream of people and it very nicely reflects the constant stream of people walking to and from work every day. Another piece, which I have a video for, this piece is by David Rokeby with Michael Awad, and it's called the Pixel Matrix. It is it's a ceiling suspended cube of 30,000 LED pixels, and the light runs through it in a rainbow, sort of permeating the cube, and it's a really beautiful effect when you see it moving. While digital public artwork can be quite magical, as is the case with all public artworks, maintenance needs to be clearly considered. There's nothing worse than a piece of digital public artwork that has been broken and neglected. Clear and proper process is key. I see the importance of clear and proper process in my role as a member of the Toronto Public Art Commission, where one of our primary responsibilities is to speak in defense of the art and the artist. We consider whether the art is given the best possible opportunity to shine, whether enough thought has been given to placement and its impact on various stakeholders, whether the budget has been properly allocated, enough consideration given to long-term maintenance, as well as other initiatives like mentorship programs for artists that will keep the entire process accessible. The process is such an intricate one and the stakes are high. It's important that the art not get lost in the shuffle. I look at the public art that exists in Toronto. I see the risks that are being taken and the way things are being improved. But we can do better, and on the Commission, we are working to improve the process as much as we can. This is where Markham can excel. Put artists at the center of the process, create mentorships and residencies and partnerships between artists, designers, and the city. Look at what's working elsewhere and seek to implement it here. Just as a little aside, one artist that I'm working with, Sean Martindale, just did a residency with the City of Toronto in their Department of Solid Waste. And he and his collaborator, JP King, came up with a series of digitally manipulated photographs of solid waste and recycling that are stunningly beautiful, and just a wonderful series of artworks that, you know, can go a long way to show people the challenges around how we deal with waste and recycling in the city. So that's been quite a successful project for Toronto. Public art is free and therefore accessible to the general public, all kinds of public. It crosses boundaries in terms of culture, language, and income level. It is democratic. At its best, it can start a conversation, allow people to see their environment differently. It can encourage people to spend time outdoors. It can be participatory. It can be seasonal or all season. It can be temporary or permanent. It can be inclusive or exclusive. An important direction for public art today is that it can involve communities, and in doing this, get residents invested in the public art that defines and beautifies their neighborhoods. This piece, that I am proud to have been on the jury for, facilitated by Helena actually, is by Rebecca Bayer, called "The Whole is Greater Than the Sum of Its Parts." It was installed in 2018 inside the Sherbourne subway station, and the mosaic wall panels are based on patterns derived from local community workshops. So local residents were actually involved in the art-making process. I have sat on several juries for public art as well, and am aware of the kinds of considerations that must be given before a selected work is confirmed. This piece, I am proud to have selected as part of a jury. It's in Toronto, and it's a sculpture and a fountain in Tattle Creek Park downtown. Titled "The Vessel" by Ilan Sandler. It is 5.7 meter high stainless steel sculpture with a water feature so that the water appears to flow over the top of the vessel in the summer season. I feel that while it won't necessarily appeal to absolutely everyone, art is subjective after all, it does tick most of the boxes in terms of scale and visual interest, curiosity. It speaks to the requirements for a water feature. It is easy to maintain. It looks good in all seasons. And it's a delight for the parents and the children, the dog walkers, and other people who frequent the park. I wanted to also show a piece of public art that is very successful on several levels and shows how art can work well both conceptually and with architecture and the city at large. This piece is called "Two Circles" from 2016, and it's by the artist Mike Alexier, the Toronto artist Mike Alexier, whose work is very much concerned with graphics and punctuation. I wrote about this piece, and it was fascinating to discover that while on the one hand it is like a giant period punctuating the base of this huge building on Adelaide Street and very visible to the public and pedestrians that drive west along Adelaide, it is also a mosaic made up of 1.6 million tiny pieces of hand-broken ceramic that you only see up close, and where you experience the hand of the artist in this gigantic, otherwise rather austere artwork. It's another example of the importance of scale. Here is a complementary mosaic on the other side of the building lobby. I look around Markham as a business owner and see a vibrant community that is brimming with potential. There is potential to go where others have not, to assess what other communities have done and to go one better, and to use art as a focal point that other municipalities turn to in envy. But in order to do this, it takes confidence, and it takes a bold, ambitious vision. I believe that Markham has the desire for a big vision. It's a risk, but the potential upside, when successful, like Mississauga's Towers, Millennium Park, or Hudson Yard, cannot be overestimated. It's huge. The question from my point of view is not whether public art can contribute to the community or shape its identity, but when. I'm looking forward to seeing Markham continue the process, rise to the occasion, and make this great city stand apart from others, not just in the GTA, but across Canada and North America. Thank you.
So the third speaker in this group is Xiaojing Yan, a local Chinese-Canadian Markham artist who is going great places. And in fact, unfortunately, she went. She got a late invitation to go to China for a site visit for an art installation. So she could not be here tonight as planned. But she did actually make this video to present to us. The quality of the sound, unfortunately, is not great, but it has been tweaked as best as we could manage. So just a little bit of background. So born in China, Xiaojing Yan is an installation artist working and living in Markham, Ontario. She received an MFA in sculpture from Indiana University of Pennsylvania in 2007 and a BFA from Nanjing Arts Institution in China. Yan's work has been exhibited in galleries and museums internationally, including Suzhou Museum, China, the Royal Ontario Museum here in Canada, many places across the country, and of course the Varley Art Gallery in fall of 2017. And her work has been included in many collections, and her public art projects can be found also across Ontario. Xiaojing is a recipient of over 40 awards and grants, including the Project Grant from the Canadian Council for the Arts and the Chalmers Arts Fellowship from the Ontario Arts Council. And recently, I'm delighted to say, she and Annick Glaude, the Varley curator, won the 41st Annual OAG Award for Exhibition and Installation Design for the exhibition at the Varley Art Gallery. Xiaojing Yan. And Annick is here with us too. So now we will over to the video.
Hello everyone. I'm so sorry that I can't be here in person, so I'm recording this for you in my studio. Thanks to the invitation of City of Markham, I'm happy to share my experience of making public art. Honestly, I feel I'm still learning from each project, as each project is so different based on budget, location, community, stakeholders, funding agencies, and many other factors. So I will speak from my experience to give you some perspectives. This is my first public art project. It was the bike rack design for City of Burlington. It titled Reflection. So this design was picked through a public call for design submission. So I submitted my design based on the city's waterfront view. The design was picked through an online voting and a jury selection process. This project was a great opportunity for artists like me at that time who do not have public art experience and wanted to get into this field. This project is a collaboration project for a condo development project in Grimsby. So I was told that this was the first public art the condo developer had ever commissioned, and it was the first contemporary sculpture in Grimsby. So because Grimsby is on the side of Lake Ontario, and then the condo project is also very close to the water. So responded to the water and the grape farming industry in that region, I designed this stainless steel and glass sculpture. This project, titled Sound of the Rain, was commissioned by Elora Center for the Arts. Elora is a beautiful town famous for the spectacular Elora Gorge and is on the bank of the Grand and Wine rivers. So the center hoped the design could relate to the water theme. After researching on the center's history, the concept of transition and connection led me to the image of a ripple. Human thoughts and actions are like drops on the surface of a pond. They create ripples that travel outwards. Every one of us is like a ripple on the pond. So this design is intended to engage people on the level of their unlived experience and inspire considerations of self among society. The work is made of anodized aluminum. This work, titled Moongate, is made of stainless steel and dichroic glass. It was installed in 2016 and was commissioned by Suzhou Industrial Park. This work was inspired by traditional moongate, a circular opening in classical Chinese garden that acts both as a passageway and a distinctive Chinese architectural element. These gates imitate the shape of the full moon, so they are called the moon gate. I used dichroic glass square pieces to hang abstract cityscape inside the stainless steel circle. So it looks like you are looking through the gate in the old garden and overlooking at the modern city. The glass is both reflective and transparent. Colors vary endlessly and delicately with changing of perspective and light. Here I use 景中有景, 移步换景, which are called the borrowing scenes strategies of classical Chinese garden to create scene with scene visual and aesthetic effect. This work here is titled The House Sets the North. It was commissioned by Blackwood Gallery in Mississauga as part of the Work of Wind, Air, Land, Sea project. I was asked to create a piece in response to climate change. As an immigrant, I always interested in the idea of home and migration. Because of the change of climate on Earth, some families and communities have forced to leave their homes. For instance, because rising sea levels, islands in the Indian Ocean will soon become uninhabitable, and the residents will have to leave. In China, there are many people left their home or even left the country because the air pollution. So I created this public art installation using thousands of meters of thread to construct a translucent courtyard. Viewers are invited to walk into the work to engage with the space. This work was designed based on the traditional Chinese courtyard, which aligns with the cardinal directions. From the top, you can see is a compass. It also referred to the Northern Star, star for navigation, guardians, and assurance. This work questions how we must reckon with our experiences of isolation and confusion in an age of rapid environmental shifts that impact not only the notion of home, but humanity's attitude towards our planetary future. I really love creating public art because public art can engender sense of pride and community identity. They reach audiences out of museums and galleries. They declare the worth of a space, a place, and a time in our shared culture. I feel my work might just affect a place in which it's placed and those living there. As Markham is the most diverse city in Canada, creating opportunities for diverse and immigrant populations to participate in public art will strengthen the overall fabric of our culture and inform audiences about the creative impulses found in all cultures. I think city should not only consider commissioning public art, but also should considering having educational programs to enhance public appreciation of art and connect artists with communities. I remember how hard it was for me to start in this area. Maybe programs can be provided, like educational programs or training opportunities for artists and the resources for public art educators. And as a Markham resident, I really look forward to seeing how public art can transform our city. Thank you.